Welcome to On Block Off Block by AeroCloud. On Block Off Block explores the exciting and ever-growing aviation industry with guests working in and with airports, and is hosted by AeroCloud CEO George Richardson.
In this episode, George speaks to Dave Lynch, the Chief Information Officer at the world's leading cargo and aircraft ground handling service provider, Swissport, about the qualities and characteristics Dave looks for in leadership, the current state of play in the ground handling market, and Dave's passion for live music, leading to the nickname Tickets Out Dave.
Dave, welcome to On Block Off Block podcast. AeroCloud and Swissport have been teammates for around 4 years now. We provide Swissport with our EDCS products across many of your sites, hopefully more. You're a career serial operator and entrepreneur, holding positions at large PLCs and small companies through every stage of growth. Music lover, family man, thought of very highly. I've done my research. You're a Northerner, Blackpool resident, and global CIO for Swissport, one of the largest or the largest ground handler in the world. Probably not many people in that boat can relate to being a global CIO as well from up in the north. So you're a rarity, and we're really glad to have you. We're working on some new things together as part of something bigger. You're relatively new at Swissport, and when we met, I remember thinking, wow, this is somebody that I can really relate to. Northern, bold, and I felt that we had some fiery moments in that meeting that we met with first, which I really enjoyed. We then connected on WhatsApp, chatted about a few different things. You work 24/7 as I do, and I enjoyed bouncing some ideas off you. This has led for me to ask you to come onto the podcast and see if you can share any stories that CEOs and alike in our industry could learn from. You're super refreshing, so thanks for coming in, and welcome to Stockport, World HQ of AeroCloud.
The day after, I was going to say the day after my hometown football team got beat 3-0 by Stockport. So,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's good. Perfect. The first question is quite a wide one. Given your background, what is it about large and complex problems that you like solving?
Gosh, I don't like failure. That's the first point. And since being probably mid-20s when I got a chance to come to Stockport, funnily enough, to a software house, I've never really been fazed by a challenge. I think in those days it was because I didn't really understand the size of the challenge. I think I've worked with some very good leaders. I think you suss out in your career very early doors whether people are going to help you or get in your way. And I've only had one person that's got in my way, and I lasted about 3 or 4 weeks in the job. So I've worked for some good leaders. I'm not really fazed by much. I mean, people talk about stress and strain in terms of the size of the challenge of the job, but I think it's more important for me about the size of your team and the quality of your team. You know, I think if you've got people around you that can work with you and help you, then that's always been the biggest thing in my career. And I've kept, I'd say loyalty is another thing as well, that if you've got people who want to work with you and move from place to place, then that's a big thing these days. I think retention, we're all sort of looking for people to stay around. We're all looking for that hook, and I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, sure. You talked before about, pushing yourself to fail, like what could actually catch you.
I have that. My catchphrase is "failure is not an option," taken from the film. And likewise, I watched not long ago actually Hacksaw Ridge with the conscientious objector, and I thought those two films sum up the sort of the team ethic. So Apollo 13 for me is the team thing, and I've bored many an IT team with that film, because the idea of going around and getting the ampage to be able to get back to planet Earth, I mean, I'm sure it was big duck for the film, but no small thing. And then that guy on the conscientious objector that stood up for his own principles and didn't back down from being the sort of guy, not necessarily a leader, but I think there's lots of leadership qualities in that guy where he never gave up. He was going to be firm to his principles, and I think that is a big thing that you've got to do in leadership. I don't think people see leadership these days as much. You even look at the politicians. I think people look for leadership and people want to work for a leader. But I think that those two films probably sum me up, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the references that I've done as well, and thank you to some of your contacts, specifically Gavin. I mean, leading from the front came up a lot. And, you're a doer. And I think we were just talking about before, a lot of PLC C-suites potentially have got a reputation for not being a doer, but that's quite the opposite for you. Certainly from the people I've spoken to. What is it about leading from the front, and where did that come from, really?
Funnily enough, playing football as a kid, and I sort of watched when I was in my early 20s. I played a decent standard of football, but I was fascinated by the manager of the team who would come in on a Saturday and Sunday morning, and or Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, and sort of put his arm around me and then go and kick somebody else up the backside. And I sort of learnt a lot that it takes all sorts, and not everybody's the same. And therefore, when I went into management, didn't really have too much background. I sort of studied part-time for a degree when I was at Blackpool Transport. They were good enough to fund me. So I think I just thought to myself, if you're a leader and you can show that you're actually doing the job, and you're also not fearful of, I don't ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself. I never have done that. I think it just happens naturally, and you build teams around you that want to work. But I've never been work shy. My dad was a grafter, my mum was a grafter, and I think it's that sort of situation of, it's not, I can't remember what syndrome they call it. Everybody's got a syndrome these days, but it's something where fear of failure, where every day I get up I think, God, somebody's going to fire me today, and I think therefore I've got to work harder than everybody else. But who knows what drives me? I mean, I've always been a bit of a self-starter, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Why operate at this level? I mean, 54,000 employees.
I don't call it a level. I have, always... When I went to America with First Group, I was amazed the first time I walked into the office, and everybody's heads were down, and I walked through the office trying to say hello to people, and I got into the office and I said to Jeremy, who ran America with me, and I said to him, why has everybody got their heads down? And he said to me, well, it's March, and we normally let IT people go in April. And
normally?
I'll tell you the story, but we normally let people go in April. And I said, well, why is that then? And he went, well, because nobody understands the IT budgets. The only thing they understand is that IT's got X amount of people. They don't understand the software and whether we need it or whatever. So we just cut heads every year. And, he said the reason why people had their head down is because they didn't want you to remember their face, which I thought was bloody awful. Anyway, thankfully we never cut heads, and we took money out of the budget. But I think you've got to be humble. I think the closer you get to the top, then you have to realise what goes on at the coalface. And I think all the businesses I've worked for have been low-margin businesses, so every penny counts, every dollar counts, and Swissport's no different. And when I look at what goes on at an airport and the surroundings, which are unusual because you normally own your own buildings and so on, and we don't own airports, and therefore we cohabitate with a number of sort of organisations, be it the airport itself, the airline, in some difficult conditions. And being out on the ramp, it doesn't take too many thunderstorms to realise that you need to be off the ramp when the thunderstorm's coming in. So I do appreciate, and I look at it the other way around when I'm spending money. Is it on the right things, and is it going to take the business forward? So I don't really bother about the size of the business, because you just can't. You'd probably get frightened with how the hell, which country do I start on tomorrow? And I think the thing with Swissport is it has a management team that is facing in the right direction, wants to make a difference, and wants to communicate that difference to the employees in the workforce. And that two-way street of communication, one of the first things we did was put an employee app in, which allowed people without an email address to communicate, to Warwick. So, we do town halls through that sort of activity now. And
you do town halls for 54,000 people?
Well, not 54,000 because not everybody dials in, but sure. we do communications.
They're available.
Video communications with 54,000. Then we do up to 1,000 at a time on the town halls, which is pretty important, because everybody wants to hear from the leadership team, and we sort of, there's always a constant of Warwick, but there's a change round. Typically, Yorick, who's the finance gent, the CFO, he'll be on there. But everybody, we want the business to know we're on as we've talked before, we're on a turnaround job. From COVID, aviation was hit pretty hard. And therefore we're on a sort of improvement of margin, and we're on a sort of improvement of working conditions and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a massive task. but highly appealing. And I think, as you said, what you've really enjoyed at Swissport is the management team that you've joined, right?
Yeah,
and
you can see everybody pulling. I've been in some jobs, not many, but I've been in some jobs where for small periods people aren't pulling the right way, and they spend most of the time sort of being difficult with each other and not necessarily facing the right way. And I've worked in small and large businesses in later time. But I also see in Swissport that, everybody wants to make a difference. Everybody wants to make sure the aircraft takes off on time. Everybody wants to make sure the fueling is done, safely. Everybody wants to make sure that we are successful in, delivering cargo around the world. I think, for me, there isn't a business. I don't think there's a business more than aviation that actually strives to be better every day. It's not always achieved because there's some difficult circumstances, but I think that it's a business that wants to improve, and we've shown in the last couple of years whilst I've been there that we are improving it. We need to carry on, but most businesses need to carry on, whether they're 5 people or 55,000.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, you've worked in businesses of all sizes. We work together. You're a massive company. We're in respect of your company, absolutely tiny in comparison, right? We'd be one team of your company.
But it's the thing I look for, and it's a very interesting point, probably worth raising, that it's people who've got a spark inside them. I won't name names on here, but there are some companies where I need to have 3 or 4 espressos before I go for a meeting. You're having to put the energy in the room. You're having to drive change. You're having to suggest what they should be doing. You guys, you're the opposite to that, in that you have that energy in the room, and you, like we, size, to be perfectly honest, isn't important. It's the delivery that's important. And we all know now with the cloud that, software houses can deliver an awful lot more because they've got that support of Azure AWS behind them to move it forward. So I think, for me, I'm looking for people that have got the energy and suppliers that have got the energy, which is important.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've sort of answered my next question, which was how do you make a huge impact with the people that you hire? It was very clear to me with the reference calls that I made on your behalf that you've got a super team, right? I think Gavin said that you sort of brought people with you to a lot of different roles. They demand that respect from being able to do the job yourself, but these people are moving with you time and time again. So what is it about those people specifically that's repeatable? And did you find that the day that you walked into Swissport?
I think you always, in the change of jobs that I've done, you always find good people. Not necessarily always within your own command, but I always look for the super users within the business as well, because I would say, what is an IT person these days? When I started down the road in Stockport, we were spending £8,000 on a 300 megabyte hard drive, and people used to turn up with sort of electrical static boots on and whatever else to pull the hard drive out. It's completely changed, and I think the role of a CIO has completely changed, and again with the whole cyber thing. So I think for me, I look for people who've got a can-do attitude. I look for people who are self-starters, organised, and actually want to improve their area. And I think when I came to Swissport, no different really to other places, you find people who probably will accept themselves that they're not necessarily going to be in that camp, and therefore there's a natural attrition of people. But you also find people who want to come on the journey who've been frustrated by a lack of change and so on. And I think you're right, I have had people jump ship a couple of times, 3 times for some people that have joined me, and that I don't underestimate. When you're younger, you don't necessarily understand why people will move. And that's massively appreciated, that people can be interested in a job, in a change. Because I think myself, for me to change jobs is a big thing. I'm not every 2 years I go somewhere else. I put 7, 8, 10 year shifts in a lot of these places because I want to make sure we properly turn the thing around. I mean, you find these days that, you talked about it before, CIOs are, as far as I'm concerned, far too vocal on things like LinkedIn and stuff like that. There's this sort of soundbite sort of activity, and for me, I really want to make that difference, and that's not always going to be done in 6 months or 18 months or 2 years. You've got to put a lot more effort in to turn business around or implement systems like we're doing at the moment. You can't
Yeah.
just turn up for 2 years, claim you conquered the world and then bugger off.
Yeah.
Because very rarely have I seen people turn large companies around in 2 years, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, I mean, so like our business, right? We're challenging such a legacy technology set and effectively starting afresh. And the way that we look at it is it's a 30 for 50 year vision, you know.
Yeah.
It's not just a pump and dump type scenario for us. This is, you know, my vocation as well as my
Well, and
career.
I think both of us have talked before that aviation as a business is very attractive. If you're going on your holidays or you're going on business trips, it's very attractive on the the sort of the airline side. But technology-wise, some of the big beasts that have been in control and in areas have got, there's not a massive amount of competition. And I think, innovation, the cloud drives a little bit more competition now. And I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for suppliers who want to make a difference for Swissport. I haven't necessarily seen that in aviation. I had my first stint in aviation 2004, 2011. It's a tough industry. It's always been a tough industry. But IT-wise, I've not massively seen, a massive move since 2011 to coming back in the back end of November 22. So I think, for me, it does need a shove in the right direction, and we do need to look at the whole mobility thing, cybersecurity is a big thing anywhere these days, but the whole, EDCS, it doesn't need to be clunky. It can be modern. It can provide information. And I think the other thing is linking to airlines and airports. We need to share data. That whole sharing of information is massively, massively important and hasn't always happened.
Yeah, 100%. And I started looking at this industry in 2011, and I think I can say that it hasn't changed much since then from our perspective, right? Until AeroCloud came along, and without it being a shameless plug, we've managed now to get up to about 70 codes with you. I think we work at maybe 7 of your codes, and that seismic change has only been happening very recently, and that's something that we're really excited about. But anyway, first 90 days at Swissport, Gavin said that you would crawl over the P&L. What is it? What is it that you're? Days, what is it you're really looking for there, without sharing anything sensitive? But give us an insight as to, you wouldn't necessarily perceive the CIO to always be looking at that. But we go back to the pounds and pence, the grafter upbringing, if you will. What is it about that first section of your time at Swissport?
First of all, I've always worked for finance people, if not the chief exec, then finance people. So I've always had drilled into me to sort of understand my numbers. And I find it that the larger the IT budget, the more low-hanging fruit there is there. So when I joined Swissport, I smiled and said the first 14 days, but I arrived at Swissport November the 14th, 2022, and was told by the then financial controller, you've got 2 weeks left of the budget season. The previous year there were 8 million over budget, and I was told I needed to cut 8 million from a budget that I didn't even understand what the budget was. So the first 2 weeks, let alone 90 days, were hard work in terms of digging into spreadsheets and numbers. And from my point of view, I think the board, when we go and ask to spend money, they deserve the right to understand that we've taken all the low-hanging fruit out. And I think in Swissport, it's no different to First Group or Go Ahead, where contracts have been let, things have changed. Are they on the numbers? I mean, we've been driving Microsoft costs down because we don't necessarily need the biggest license type. So I think for me, it's, if you know your numbers, you are. I think you're respected by people if you can prove. I've also we work in clusters in Swissport. Before it was divisions. But I'm spending people's money, and those divisions, as I went right back to baggage handling and cargo, that takes a lot to earn the money. So I need to make sure that the divisional heads understand that the money that I'm spending is wise, and they understand it. And if I'm looking to save money, then that's where we go. But
yeah, just for context, 3.5 billion euros of turnover. So 1 or 2% is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And in IT budget wise in Swissport is 76 million euros, and that's not all value, and that's what we've been looking to take value out of and look at contracts that we can bring in that will add value, basically. Before that, it was in First Group, it was about 100 odd million on a 7 billion turnover. So these are big numbers, but people are frightened to get into those numbers. And for me, I need to understand contract end dates, expiries, and so on. And I've been lucky with some of the people that have hopped with me to these places are effectively financially trained people as well. That it's not all me doing the work. They will dig in and sort of get into grips with it. But I think it's important, and it also shows the leadership around you that you're not prepared to spend money that you don't have.
Agreed. Transportation seems to be a thing. First, that's trains and buses, some planes. Now the world's largest ground handler. What is it about the complexity of transportation or the appeal? Or is it you just like buses, trains and planes?
Probably a bit of both, but I mean, I don't know. I started, as I said, at a software house in Stockport that did public transport, and believe it or not, barristers' chambers. A bizarre thing which I won't go into why on earth we had those two diverse things. But I think public transport, aviation, school buses, Greyhound coaches has pretty big connections in the quality of the people who are doing the job, the care for doing the job, the whole safety aspect of it is a big thing. And I think it obviously attracts a very dedicated individual, time served people that really want to make a difference. And I think they're industries that are low margin businesses. They're not software in terms of generative like Facebook and Google and Microsoft and things like that, but they do make a difference. And I think I've always wanted to see the difference that I'm making and be able to see that with the teams. And also, I think it's just the fascination. I mean, the day I went out to see Greyhound, which is an iconic brand, and just sat with the chief exec, a guy called Dave Lynch, who took me round, and his first thing was to take me round the memorabilia rooms they had within there and show me where it had come from. There's a lot of history with these places, and I think it's about making a difference. School buses, 44,000 school buses was a big thing. Aviation, the numbers, 300 airports, 54 countries, it's massive. And so one of the biggest difficulties, how can we be consistent around the world? And that is, again, around systems and, as we now speak, mining of data and improving things via that.
Sure, I mean, there's been some massive challenges, right? Labour market, post-COVID. It's a very public problem, isn't it? If there is anything that goes wrong.
I now have regular updates from people who go on holiday in Blackpool or around and tell me that I am responsible for losing their bag. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But
no, it's a very public thing.
It's a massive public thing. But I mean, it is. It is very public. And we only have to look at Manchester recently with the power outage as to how newsworthy that is.
Yep.
And immediately people having to get on the television and explain what's gone on. So I'm very real in the whole continuity aspect of it, and how do we make sure that we are resilient. Again, it comes back to having the right suppliers and having people that if things do go wrong, you can call up and work with you to improve it.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I think that's a big thing that we say. We sell a partnership effectively at AeroCloud, and I think that's a big thing is when the chips are down, because they will be down ultimately. So, very publicly, a lot of CEOs had a crack at the CrowdStrike guy, and yes, I'm sure the details of that, they committed fault, right, and it caused a lot of. I mean, Delta reportedly $500 million in losses, dollars, etc., etc. But the reality is how they dealt with it when the chips were down, and that'll be the testament. We're not a CrowdStrike customer, right? But if we were, I'd want to know what they're like to work with when they're on the knees, type thing, and that's what I look for.
Sadly, we are a CrowdStrike customer, so that was a 5:30 in the morning job where I got woke up. But I think people, and it was said after CrowdStrike, people see technology as infallible, and it's not. Sure. Right. The problem with technology is that it's built by humans, and humans are infallible, and therefore, we have got to strive to build quality. And I think in my career, the cloud, the resilience that the cloud has brought. But again, yourself, you've got to set up that resilience. You can't just dump something in the cloud and it be there. So the basics are always there in technology, that you've got to plan to fail so that you understand in failure what are you going to do. But I also think, and again, it's something else we talked about, is that when you have failures, you certainly see people around you as to how they react, and I think that is an important thing. I look for people. It's not about, well, who's to blame 5 minutes after the incident. It's about how the hell do we get this back up and understand then how we don't do it again.
Sure. So that's all thing. I think all customers, partners want to hear is that we've understood what it is that caused it. It's not going to happen again.
Correct.
And we're back to normal.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What does the future of ground handling look like from your perspective?
I think it can be improved by technology. I think that we talked just briefly before about the lack of investment in technology, and I think we are fixing that within Swissport now, and we're looking to, fix the quality. I think investment in technology allows better data to come out of that. We were using bits of paper and all that sort of thing, and I think we're at the forefront now of mobilising the workforce and making sure that we can capture data at the forefront. I think the other thing for me is technology around safety. Safety's a massively important thing. It's always been right through my career that, effectively you're paying passengers and you've also got your own employees in there. I think there's a lot more that technology can drive with that. And I see that data, I do think that the whole idea, and we're trying to push it now with airports. Zurich is working with us on a project called One Flight, and we're hoping to take that out round the world. We've got another project called the Gate app, which is again sharing data with the airport, Swiss Airlines, and our employees at the front end to let the control functions of those organisations know where the planes are at any one time in terms of being able to take off and move around. So I think it's around, my personal view, I think you've got to take safety, cybersecurity as a given. So we can't say, we'll do that next year. That's there. I think safety, technology, data are the big things. But I do think that the biggest change is only going to happen when we see more airports and more airlines and more ground handlers working together to share that data and improve it and make sure the quality of it is better.
Absolutely, yeah. Ground handling market today worth about 34 billion per annum, projected via compounded annual growth rate of nearly 10% by 2030. We believe that the ground handling market could be worth 50 billion plus. Has there ever been a better time to be in the ground handling business? I
mean, my view is that aviation after COVID was hit pretty hard, but it came back pretty much immediately. I mean, one of the challenges that Swissport had is it was talking with its airlines around, what's the airline schedule going to be, and it was, we're going to gradually build it back, and then all of a sudden it was bang, it was all back. So I think we've come through those periods of resilience of employees and so on, but I can only see growth. The cargo marketplace, again, growth, but it's got to be qualitative and it's got to be based on data, and my view is upping the customer proposition. I mean, the airlines more than the railways, but the airlines got ticketing right, but I think there's still a lot more that we can collectively do around the whole process, because ultimately when you give your bag, you don't necessarily know that Swissport or somebody else that's handling your bag, because we're not the brand or the logo at check-in. So for me, it's that sharing of data and all being unified around delivering better quality to the customer that's going to help. And then I think the cargo world, shipping of things around, we've got to be more greener in that approach, but we've got to look at the packaging and we've got to look at the simplicity of how we transfer goods around, to be honest.
Yeah. Couple of personal ones. Gavin suggested that your relationship with your mother and father, which you've mentioned previously, had hugely impactful on your ability to work hard and drive through the gritty and shitty problems presented to you in your career that you've had to overcome. What is it about hard graft that comes easier to you, maybe, than others?
Gosh, don't know. It's probably born into you, isn't it? In that I think my dad always used to tell the story about coming over from Ireland at 14 with a bar of soap and a suitcase. Can't even imagine, getting on a boat at 14 and coming into Liverpool, to be honest. So that in itself, I think, just builds Jesus. I've had it a bit easier. And then, my mum's, when I was growing up, my dad worked at the Winter Gardens in Blackpool, which was a sort of unsociable hours job. Could be, earlys, middles, lates, and so on. And my mum had 2 jobs. Always had 2 jobs, and I look at that and think that's not a sort of simple thing to do that. I think technology's made it a bit easier, I think, bringing, families and whatever together, but it's also added difficulties the older I've got. But I think it's just your upbringing, it's what you see, isn't it? I wasn't ever given anything, I wasn't particularly academically great when I was 16, 18, and then all of a sudden something clicked into me about business studies, and I quite enjoyed it, and I thought, well, actually I can make something out of that, and that was technology as well. My uncle got me started in technology just around the time that PCs came out, telling me that this was an area that I should consider. So I think it's just the way I've been brought up, and I've got that fear of failure that I don't want to. Not that my mum and dad ever said, if you fail, you can't come home. They never said anything like that. But I think personally, there's always been a fear of failure that I want to be. I don't want to accept that.
Yeah, my dad once said to me, he said, the only issue, because he gave me everything, or both my parents did everything. I had a fantastic education, lots of opportunity, but he said the one thing you'll never know is what it's like to have absolutely sweet FA.
Yeah.
And he said that was a privilege for him. But so I can relate massively to what your dad said there, and I never took that for granted. It sounds like you've done the same.
Yeah, and I think it's something I've tried to instill into my kids as well. And I think, I look at technology, and I think it's been good in some ways, but I think the whole social media, the whole mental health, mental well-being thing is massively important these days in the workplace, to be honest, because people aren't, when I was a kid, you had to accept that you weren't very good at football, or you weren't very good at cricket because you got picked last in the playground. We've brought people up now that get told they're brilliant, even if they're not. And then when they get in the workplace, they're not necessarily the right ingredients. So it's just,
I agree with that.
how do we get the best out of the young people? That's another thing that's taxing me at the moment. How can we get more people in to be, the technologists of the future? Because they don't necessarily want to do technology these days. It's sort of, how do we attract people into the industry and make it the
sure.
The
and you have a business that's reliant on good people. Let's be honest. A lot of your processes are driven by people that are also in the public eye. Like now, people filming your staff all the time.
Yep.
How they treated my case or whatever. Like big responsibilities for the people that are right, quote unquote, at the lowest ring of the chain or the pyramid or whatever. So it's massively important now more than ever. Do you think working hard trumps all attributes in building great teams, or how much of a factor do you think that is?
Very good point. I think working hard is only one of those points. You've got to be committed, and you've got to bring people with you, and you've got to have time for people. I think, again, if I could write a book now, it would be full of pearls of wisdom. But when I was 25, it was the school of hard knocks that taught me all the lessons, all the things I got wrong. I won't do that again. And so you get into your 50s and you're thinking, well, actually, I know a bit more now. But yeah, I think you've got to bring people with you. You've got to give people what they want, and that can be very different. People can, you've got to be considerate when people have times in their life where, maybe things aren't working well. You've just got to say to them, go sort that out. I mean, the amount of stories I've heard from people over the years that have not been treated well in those circumstances. You've got to look at how you bring them on. What do they want out of the job going forward? But and I think a bit of humour. I mean, I think I've always tried to be maybe more peculiar than funny, but I think you've just got to be there for people when they need you, and you've got to make sure that they're doing the job and they're bringing other people in there as well.
Agreed. Live music, I believe, is your thing. What is it about live music that you love? I believe that you travel far and wide to get the fix. I think we said you've done many gigs already this year.
Yeah. I wouldn't like
COVID
to.
must have been a nightmare for that.
COVID was a nightmare, but yeah, I've always liked. I don't know what it is with music, and but right from being a kid, I used to collect the picture discs and the 45s and whatever else, and the albums. So I quite enjoyed it, and I'm not one of these people who says, "Oh, it's better when it was on vinyl." I think the digital things, but I've just the bands growing up in the 80s. They were just brilliant. I mean, the bands in those days were very, very good. I think there's less music around these days, but there's still some very good groups that have grown up. But I'm a bit of bit of a fan of a lot of the 80s groups. But again, I like, more modern stuff as well. But probably drive my wife mad because she's not into quite the same sort of music scene as I am.
Right.
But that and football. But I found that the only way I can get some balance is to listen to a bit of music and switch off for half an hour. Strangely, if I'm working, I can't have music. I've got to be quiet in the background. I can't do the music. But yeah, I think God only knows how much I've spent on concerts over the years.
Yeah, I was going to say Depeche Mode's one of your favourites, right?
Yeah.
You were saying before you've seen them 9 times now.
9 times this last year.
This last year, do you know how many times in total?
20. I think it was 27.
27. And you've been to America to see them?
I've been to America, I've been into Europe, yeah. But I've been... Coldplay's another one, Simple Minds, Ultravox, Keane, Snow Patrol. So, I have a pretty good, wide, sort of music taste, to be honest. So,
because you live in Blackpool, you grew up in Blackpool, there's clearly a link between music, tickets, etc., etc. I believe your nickname amongst your friends is Ticket
Tout,
Dave or Ticket Tout Dave.
Yeah. I can typically get most tickets anybody wants. Not through anything other than I'm quicker on the internet than most people.
Okay.
But I don't have any dodgy dealings. But yeah, I drive people mad about living in Blackpool, and I'm very passionate. I mean, my mum and dad saw what I would say probably was the early and the best years of Blackpool in the 50s and 60s with the Stones and the Beatles and all the film stars coming to Blackpool when there was no such thing as cheap foreign holidays and so on. But I grew up, I worked at the Winter Gardens for a couple of years in the early 80s, and the summer shows, and there were 6,000 people in there. So it's coming back. I mean, it's had a tough period with the sort of thing. The football team helps on occasions. It's not helping right now, but I think my view is it's still the best place on the planet, even though there's plenty of people who want to tell me that I'm wrong. But
fantastic, I love that. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us, and I hope this has been of enjoyment for you as well, and hopefully help some people listening. If people do want to get in touch with you, LinkedIn, what's your bag? Are you a Twitter person, X person, or you don't want to be contacted?
No, I'm not like that. LinkedIn or Twitter or X as it's called these days, isn't it? But or email. You can publish my email on the bottom of wherever this is going. That's fine.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
No,
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to On Block, Off Block by AeroCloud. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, and remember to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with future episodes. On Block, Off Block is hosted by George Richardson and produced by Alex Greaves.